Hey there, garden friends. Welcome back to Botanic Haven, your go-to channel for everything about gardening, plant care, and creating those beautiful green spaces both inside your home and out in your yard. Today, we're diving into something that's absolutely crucial if you're starting your seeds indoors this February, keeping those seedlings short, stocky, and strong instead of tall, leggy, and weak. I know February can feel like forever when you're itching to get your hands dirty and start the growing season, but this is actually the perfect time to get your seedlings off to a rock-solid start. Over the years, I've learned that the difference between seedlings that thrive after transplanting and ones that struggle comes down to those first few weeks of care. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's talk about 14 practical tips that'll transform your seedling game this early spring. The first thing I want to talk about is light, because honestly, this is where most people go wrong without even realizing it. Your seedlings need intense, direct light for at least 12 to 16 hours a day. I remember when my neighbor Daisy started her tomatoes on a sunny windowsill and couldn't figure out why they were stretching toward the glass like they were trying to escape. The thing is, even a bright window usually doesn't provide enough light intensity. Plants that don't get adequate light will stretch and reach, trying desperately to find more energy. This creates those tall, thin stems that flop over at the slightest breeze. If you're serious about strong seedlings, invest in proper grow lights. I use basic shop lights with full-spectrum LED bulbs. Nothing fancy, and I keep them just 2 to 3 inches above the seedling tops. As the plants grow, I raise the lights to maintain that close distance. This proximity is key. It gives them the light intensity they need without making them stretch. You'll notice the difference within days. Seedlings grown under proper lighting develop thick stems, deep green leaves, and a compact growth habit that screams healthy plant. Temperature control is another game changer that doesn't get enough attention. Most seeds germinate best in warm conditions, usually between 70 and 80 degrees Fahrenheit, which is why heat mats are so popular. But here's what many beginners don't know. Once those seeds sprout and you see green emerging from the soil, you actually want to drop the temperature a bit. Keeping seedlings in the same warm conditions that encourage germination will promote fast, leggy growth. Instead, move them to a slightly cooler area, ideally around 65 to 70 degrees during the day and a bit cooler at night. This temperature drop encourages compact growth and helps develop stronger stems. I learned this from an old gardener named Oliver who ran a small nursery for decades. He always said that babying seedlings with constant warmth was like raising kids who never learned to be tough. A little bit of temperature variation actually strengthens them and prepares them for real-world conditions. Of course, you don't want to shock them with cold drafts or freezing temps, but a natural day-night temperature fluctuation of 5 to 10 degrees works wonders for building resilient plants. Air circulation is something that often gets overlooked in the excitement of seed starting, but it's absolutely essential for preventing both disease and encouraging strong stem development. When seedlings grow in stagnant air, they're more susceptible to damping off, that dreaded fungal disease that causes seedlings to suddenly collapse at the soil line. Beyond disease prevention, gentle air movement actually stimulates plants to grow thicker, sturdier stems. In nature, wind constantly moves plants around, and they respond by building stronger support structures. You can replicate this indoors with a small oscillating fan set on low, positioned to create gentle movement across your seedling trays. Don't aim a strong breeze directly at tender seedlings, just create enough airflow that you can see leaves moving slightly. I usually run my fan for a few hours in the morning and again in the afternoon. This simple practice has dramatically reduced my damping off problems and given me seedlings with noticeably thicker stems. If this guide has helped you, write 1 in the comments. And if not, write 0. This way, I'll know which tips are most useful for your garden. Now let's talk about watering, because this is where good intentions can lead to weak seedlings. The instinct is to keep soil constantly moist, worrying that any dryness will harm delicate roots. But overwatering is actually more dangerous than slight underwatering for most seedlings. When soil stays soggy, roots don't develop properly because they have no reason to search for water. They stay shallow and weak, and the plants above ground mirror this with spindly growth. Instead, water thoroughly when you do water, but then let the top of the soil dry out slightly before watering again. This wet-dry cycle encourages roots to grow deeper and spread wider as they search for moisture. I check my seedlings every morning by feeling the soil surface. If it's dry to the touch, I water from the bottom by setting trays in a shallow pan of water for 15 to 20 minutes, then draining completely. Bottom watering encourages roots to grow downward toward the moisture rather than staying shallow at the surface. It also keeps the stem bases dry, which helps prevent damping off disease. Proper spacing might seem obvious, but I see crowded seedling trays all the time, and this creates weak plants guaranteed to struggle. When seeds are sown too thickly or seedlings aren't thinned properly, they compete for light, air, and nutrients. This competition creates exactly the kind of tall, stretched growth you're trying to avoid. Each seedling needs enough space that its leaves aren't touching its neighbours. Yes, it can be heartbreaking to thin out healthy-looking sprouts, but it's necessary. I've learned to be ruthless about this. When multiple seeds germinate in one cell or pot, I use small scissors to snip off the weakest ones at soil level rather than pulling them out, which could disturb roots of the seedling you're keeping. For most vegetables and flowers, leave about 2 inches between seedlings in trays, or grow just 1 plant per cell in cell packs. This gives each plant the room it needs to develop properly without competition. The growing medium you choose has a bigger impact than you might think. Regular garden soil or heavy potting soil can compact too much in small containers, restricting root growth and holding too much moisture. Seedlings need a light, fluffy mix that drains well while still retaining some moisture. I make my own seed starting mix using equal parts peat moss or coco coir, vermiculite and perlite. This creates an airy medium that roots can easily penetrate. Some gardeners add a small amount of compost for nutrients, though many seed starting mixes are intentionally low in nutrients at first. The reason is that seeds contain enough stored energy to get plants through the first few weeks, and starting in a lean mix encourages roots to develop strongly as they search for nutrition. Once seedlings develop their first true leaves, those leaves that look like the mature plant, not the initial rounded seed leaves, that's when you can begin very light feeding. Speaking of feeding, this brings us to fertilization strategy. A common mistake is either feeding too early, too heavily, or not at all. Seedlings are like teenagers. They need nutrition to grow, but giving them too much too soon creates soft, fast growth that's vulnerable to stress. Once true leaves appear, start with a very diluted liquid fertilizer, about 1/4 the strength recommended on the package. I use a balanced fertilizer like 10-10-10 or a fish emulsion, applied every week or two. This gentle feeding provides enough nutrition to support healthy growth without pushing plants to grow too fast. My friend Rose, who's been growing vegetables for her farmer's market stand for 15 years, swears by giving her seedlings diluted compost tea once they're a few weeks old. She says it not only feeds them but also introduces beneficial microbes that protect against disease. The key with any fertilizer is moderation during the seedling stage. You want steady, strong growth, not rapid, weak growth. Container size matters more than most beginners realize. Starting seeds in containers that are too large can lead to overwatering issues because excess soil holds moisture that roots can't access, creating conditions for root rot. Conversely, containers that are too small restrict root development and cause plants to become root-bound quickly, which stunts growth and leads to stress. For most seeds, starting in cells that are about 2 inches deep and wide is perfect. Once seedlings develop a couple of sets of true leaves and roots are visible at drainage holes, it's time to pot up into larger containers. This stepping up process, moving from smaller to progressively larger pots, encourages strong root development at each stage. I usually move seedlings from cell packs into 3 or 4 inch pots before their final transplant outdoors. This extra step might seem like more work, but it creates significantly stronger root systems, which translate to stronger plants overall. Humidity management is another factor that influences how compact and sturdy your seedlings grow. While high humidity is beneficial during germination when you're trying to keep soil moist and encourage seeds to sprout, maintaining very high humidity after germination can promote the same kind of soft, stretched growth that causes problems. Once seedlings emerge, remove humidity domes or plastic covers to allow air exchange and gradually acclimate plants to normal indoor humidity levels. This transition can happen over a few days rather than all at once to avoid shocking tender seedlings. Normal household humidity Typically between 30 and 50% is actually fine for most seedlings once they've sprouted. If your home is extremely dry during winter heating season, you might run a small humidifier nearby, but don't create a tropical environment. Moderate humidity combined with good air circulation strikes the right balance for developing tough, resilient plants. Here's something that surprises people when I mention it. Brushing or gently touching your seedlings for a few minutes each day actually makes them grow shorter and sturdier. This technique, sometimes called mechanical stimulation, mimics the effect of wind-rustling plants outdoors. When you gently run your hand back and forth over the tops of seedlings, they respond by producing a hormone called ethylene, which triggers them to grow thicker stems and more compact overall structure. I do this every morning when I check my seedlings, just a minute or two of light brushing. It sounds almost too simple to be true, but the science backs it up. And I've definitely noticed my brushed seedlings are noticeably stockier than ones I've left untouched. Some gardeners use a ruler or piece of cardboard to brush across the tops of seedlings in trays. Just be gentle, you're not trying to damage them, just provide that mechanical stimulus. Timing your seeds starting correctly is crucial for avoiding leggy seedlings. It's tempting to start seeds too early because you're excited about the growing season, but if you start tomatoes in January for a garden that won't be ready until May, you're creating a problem for yourself. Those seedlings will outgrow their containers, become root-bound and start stretching for light no matter how good your setup is. Different plants need different lead times before transplanting outdoors. Most tomatoes and peppers need 6 to 8 weeks, while squash and cucumbers only need 3 to 4 weeks. Fast-growing flowers like zinnias might only need 4 weeks. I keep a simple calendar on my wall where I count backward from my average last frost date to determine when each crop should be started. This prevents me from having huge, unwieldy seedlings that are desperate to get outside while the weather is still too cold. Right-sized seedlings that match your transplant timing will always be healthier and stockier. The type of containers you use can also influence plant growth in ways you might not expect. Peat pots and other biodegradable containers can sometimes wick moisture away from roots if they dry out, and their sides can become hard, restricting root growth if they're not kept consistently moist. On the other hand, plastic cells and pots retain moisture better and are reusable, but you need to ensure they have adequate drainage holes. I've had good luck with both, but I've learned that if I use peat pots, I need to keep them sitting in a shallow tray with a bit of water to prevent the pots themselves from drying out. Some gardeners prefer making soil blocks, which are compressed blocks of potting mix that eliminate containers entirely. These work great because roots air prune themselves when they reach the edge of the block, preventing the plant from becoming root-bound. Whatever container system you choose, make sure it provides good drainage and enough room for roots to develop before transplant time. Hardening off is technically a late-stage process, but it's worth mentioning because it's your final opportunity to strengthen seedlings before they face the real world. This is the process of gradually exposing indoor-grown seedlings to outdoor conditions over 7 to 10 days. You start by placing them outside in a sheltered, shaded spot for just an hour or two on the first day, then gradually increase exposure time and sun intensity each day. This allows plants to adjust to wind, direct sunlight, and temperature fluctuations without shocking them. I learned the hard way that skipping this step leads to sunburned leaves, windburned stems, and transplant shock even when seedlings look strong indoors. My neighbour Lucas, who has an amazing vegetable garden every year, calls hardening off the boot camp that turns pampered seedlings into tough soldiers. He sets up a protected area on his covered porch where he can easily move trays in and out, gradually increasing their outdoor time. By the end of the hardening off period, plants are spending full days and even nights outside, ready to handle whatever the garden throws at them. Now let's talk about what to do when, despite your best efforts, you notice seedlings starting to stretch and get leggy. First, don't panic. You can often correct the problem if you catch it early. Immediately improve light conditions by moving plants closer to your light source or upgrading to stronger bulbs. If natural light is your issue, add supplemental artificial lighting. You can also try carefully transplanting leggy seedlings deeper into fresh potting mix, burying part of the stem up to the first set of leaves. Many plants, especially tomatoes, can actually grow new roots from buried stem sections, which helps stabilize them and can almost reset their growth pattern. Reduce watering slightly and make sure temperatures aren't too warm. Sometimes leggy seedlings can be salvaged and will bush out once conditions improve, but prevention is always easier than correction. The key is catching stretching early before stems become so thin and weak that they can't support themselves. One final insight I've gained over years of starting seeds is that different plant species have different tendencies toward legginess. Tomatoes, for instance, are notorious for stretching if conditions aren't perfect, while peppers tend to be naturally more compact. Brassicas like broccoli and cabbage can handle slightly lower light better than tomatoes. Flowers vary widely, with some like marigold staying naturally bushy, while others like snapdragons can get leggy easily. Understanding your specific plants helps you adjust care accordingly. I keep simple notes each year about which varieties stayed compact and which ones stretched, and this helps me fine-tune my approach. Some seedlings might need lights kept even closer, while others can handle being a bit further away. This kind of observation and adjustment based on what you're actually seeing rather than rigid rules is what separates good seedling growing from great seedling growing. The beautiful thing about these 14 tips is that none of them require expensive equipment or expert knowledge. They're all straightforward practices that anyone can implement with basic supplies and a bit of attention to detail. Strong, stocky seedlings are within reach for every gardener willing to provide proper light, appropriate temperatures, good air circulation, careful watering, adequate spacing, quality growing medium, gentle feeding, right-size containers, humidity management, mechanical stimulation, proper timing, suitable containers, careful hardening off, and quick correction when needed. When you get these fundamentals right, you'll be amazed at how much better your seedlings look compared to previous years. They'll have thick green stems, deep-coloured leaves, and a compact growth habit that just radiates health and vigour. When transplant time arrives, these plants will transition smoothly to the garden, establish quickly, and ultimately produce better yields or blooms than weak, leggy seedlings ever could. I want to share something else I've discovered through trial and error over the seasons, and that's the importance of consistency in your seedling care routine. Plants thrive on predictability. When you water at roughly the same time each day, keep light schedules consistent, and maintain stable temperatures, seedlings develop more evenly and robustly. I've noticed that when my schedule gets chaotic and I'm watering randomly or forgetting to turn lights on and off at regular times, my seedlings show the stress. They might not die or even look obviously unhealthy, but they don't have that same vigorous, compact growth that consistently cared for plants display. Think of it like your own body's response to irregular sleep or eating schedules. You can survive it, but you don't feel your best or perform optimally. Plants are the same way. Setting up simple systems helps maintain this consistency even when life gets busy. I use an inexpensive timer for my grow lights so they automatically turn on at 6 in the morning and off at 10 at night, giving my seedlings 16 hours of light without me having to remember. This one simple tool has made a huge difference in the uniformity and quality of my seedlings. Another aspect worth discussing is the psychological side of seedling care, which might sound strange but actually matters quite a bit. When you're invested in your plants and checking on them regularly, you catch problems early and respond quickly. I found that spending just 10 minutes each morning observing my seedlings, really looking at them rather than just glancing, helps me notice subtle changes that signal issues before they become serious. Maybe the colour is slightly off on a few plants, or some stems are starting to look thinner than others, or there's early moisture stress showing up. These small observations allow for small corrections that prevent big problems. It's like the difference between regular health checkups versus waiting until you're seriously ill to see a doctor. Preventive attention keeps your seedlings on track toward that strong, stocky growth pattern you're aiming for. Plus, there's something genuinely enjoyable about this daily ritual of plant checking. It's a peaceful way to start the day, connecting with the growing things you're nurturing and anticipating the garden they'll eventually become. I also want to touch on record keeping, which might seem tedious but actually makes you a better grower year after year. I keep a simple notebook where I jot down what I planted, when I started seeds, what conditions they grew under, and how they performed. Over time, this information becomes incredibly valuable. You start to see patterns. Maybe you consistently start basil too early and it always gets leggy. Or perhaps your pepper seedlings always do great but your eggplant struggles. These insights allow you to adjust your approach specifically for different crops. Last year, I realised by looking back through my notes that I'd been starting my cucurbits too early for 3 years running, always ending up with overgrown plants by transplant time. This year, I'm waiting an extra 2 weeks to start them, and I'm confident they'll be much better sized and healthier when it's time to move them outdoors. Without those notes, I'd probably have made the same mistake again. The relationship between root development and top growth is something that really clicked for me a few years back when Ivy, a master gardener friend, explained it during a garden club meeting. She said to imagine roots and shoots like a scale that needs to stay balanced. If you create conditions that promote fast top growth, warm temperatures, high humidity, excessive fertilizer, without equally supporting root development, the plant becomes top-heavy and unstable. But when you focus on root health through proper watering, good drainage, appropriate container size, and that stepping up process I mentioned earlier, the top growth naturally follows in a more balanced, compact way. This is why some of the most successful seedling growers seem to obsess over roots, even though you can't easily see them. They know strong roots are the foundation of strong plants. When I started thinking about seedling care through this lens, prioritizing root health over visible green growth, my results improved dramatically. Weather patterns during February can also affect your indoor seedling setup in ways you might not immediately consider. If you're experiencing particularly cloudy, dark weather, even plants near windows will receive less natural light, making supplemental lighting even more critical. During cold snaps, if your seedling area is near exterior walls or windows, temperatures might drop more than you realize at night, potentially slowing growth or causing stress. Conversely, during surprisingly warm February days, if your seedlings are in a south-facing window or sunroom, temperatures could spike higher than ideal. Being aware of how outdoor weather affects your indoor growing environment helps you make necessary adjustments. I've started keeping a small thermometer right at the level of my seedling trays, not just relying on the general room temperature, because there can be surprising variations at different heights and locations within a room. Finally, let's talk about the mental game of patience, because this might be the hardest part of growing strong seedlings. We live in a world of instant gratification, and gardening forces us to slow down and work on nature's timeline. Those first few weeks after seeds germinate can feel agonizingly slow. You want to see rapid growth and big plants, but what you really want is steady, strong growth that creates resilient plants. I've had to learn to celebrate small victories, the appearance of true leaves, the thickening of a stem, the deepening of leaf color, rather than wishing plants would just hurry up and get big. This patience pays off enormously at transplant time when your compact, well-developed seedlings sail through the transition while someone else's tall, rushed plants struggle and sulk. The gardening season is long, and starting right matters far more than starting fast. So as we move through February and edge towards spring, use these early weeks to set your garden up for success. The care you provide now when seedlings are small and vulnerable pays dividends throughout the entire growing season. Every bit of attention you give to proper lighting, temperature control, air movement, watering technique, spacing, growing medium, feeding, container choices, humidity, mechanical stimulation, timing, hardening off, and quick problem correction creates stronger plants that will reward you with abundant harvests or beautiful blooms. I can't wait to hear how your seedlings turn out this year. Remember, gardening is always a learning process, and every season teaches us something new. Here at Botanic Haven, we're all learning together, sharing what works and supporting each other's green thumbs. Happy planting, friends, and here's to your strongest seedlings yet.